Welcome, and today I want to explore a few different maps and a few histories pertaining to the discovery of America. Now, before we get too deep into this, the mainstream tells us that Christopher Columbus was an Italian explorer. He's credited with opening of the Americas for conquest and settlement by Europeans. Columbus's early life is somewhat obscure, but they agree that he was born in the Republic of Genoa. After years of lobbying, the Catholic monarchs of Spain agreed to sponsor a journey west in the name of the Crown of Castile. Columbus left Spain in 1492 with 3 ships after a stop in the Canary Islands. His landing place was an island in the Bahamas known by its native inhabitants as Guanahani. Its exact location is uncertain, and he would make 3 more voyages after that. Many landmarks and institutions in the Western Hemisphere bear his name, including the country of Colombia. So in 1492, he sails the ocean blue, and yet, in this map, we see a lot of development, a lot of activity already here. And if we zoom in a little closer, here down, Florida is already Florida, and filled with what is usually the symbol for a town, and is depicted as a castle, or several castles at times, typically along the rivers. And this map seems to correlate with many of the others. Hochelaga, we recognize that. And again, along the St. Lawrence, Canada, towns everywhere, from east to west. So here we have a date of 1507, but there's several dates. Here we have 1500. And how I always look for the Rocky Mountains. And how can you tell the Rocky Mountains? Because all rivers to the west of the Rockies flow to the Pacific Ocean, and all rivers east flow to the Atlantic. So here we have rivers moving east, and here we have rivers moving west. We have also rivers moving north, which we typically don't see. And we have it emptying into this Lago de Conibas, probably the lake of Conibas. And we have actually a town depicted in the middle of the lake. Very interesting. And here we see towns as well. And they empty into the northern seas. And this map actually depicts the North Polar regions that would soon disappear from maps, and always depicted the same. And the inlets to these land masses have these smaller masses of land, always depicted the same way, as we can see if we take a quick peek here. So yes, this would be the north of America in this map of Mercator in 1595. And we see these rivers in the north dumping into the northern sea. Now where we have masses of ice, and here we see towns. We actually see towns in the north of America in this 1595 map of Mercator. And so here it's a Canoga, it looks like, a town. Zubilaga, another town. And also this region is called California region. And it seems to me that the California region started actually at the north part of America. I mean, north part of Canada, and spread southwards. But many towns along this region that is not supposed to have this type of civilization in this time period, according to the narrative. Now here, I believe, would be the Great Salt Lake, and at one point, the Great Salt Lake must have emptied into the sea, into the Gulf. And here on this side, again, we can see that the rivers flow eastwards. So this would be Colorado, and this would be Utah. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cities. And if you remember in a past video that I presented an old map of America, we showed a small paragraph in the corner of the map that said the rivers emptied into a salt sea or lake surrounded by, I believe it said 6 noble cities. 6 noble cities, and then there was several dozen towns around the 6 noble cities, or perhaps it was several hundred. And very interesting, in this map we have some kind of a confirmation of this in this time period. And here we see California. And we also see no Great Lakes. Still no Great Lakes. And, considering there is much detail, again, I think it would be very difficult to miss such a feature. And this map is from the David Rumsey collection. Really amazing resolution that they give us. And so this really seems to predate anything that would have come after Christopher Columbus. This is clearly an older people. And, the West is supposed to be the last area to be explored. And yes, we have stories of, Spaniards coming and, settling the West, and we do see that. But this is something else. I mean, this is as if it's a unified people. A established and settled people. Pre-Columbus. Let's have a little look at a Columbus map. This is a map that he made in 1490, supposedly, before he sailed to America. And here it looks like what we see is, we see the Mediterranean in the middle here. And here we can see Italy, it appears. And here, I believe, is Egypt. And it's very difficult to make out on this map. It took me a minute until I realized that the borders for these countries, or land masses at this point, are made up of the names of the towns. And this map really shows a lot of development. If all of these are towns, and unfortunately I can't zoom in anymore, but this just does not look to me like a map that Columbus made. And we can see here where they provide us with this map here. Columbus map drawn in 1490 in the Lisbon workshop of Bartholomew and Christopher Columbus. And apparently Christopher Columbus lived in Lisbon and married a Portuguese woman. But anyway, 1490, so 2 years before, and I just don't think that this looks like a Columbus map. I really don't. I think this is a much older map, and it's not made with the Western mind state, the types of maps that we usually create. This seems like something much older, and even these drawings here that we can see, and it's a different hand. I'm not even sure if Christopher Columbus really existed, and if he did, I don't think that this would be the style map that he would make. I mean, he would have no idea about, these lines would appear to be, what some have called ley lines, or maybe energy lines. And here it appears as if there is a map of the stars, or is this a flat Earth map? I'm not sure if what exactly this is depicting, or could this be depicting these lines? Could these, some of these run in the same direction? Again, could this be some kind of a flat Earth map? I'm not sure. Probably a map of the stars. And again, in this map from 1572 of Abraham Ortelius, we also see similarities. We see the same landmass in the North Pole, depicting the 4 continents, and we have this map of America with much less civilization now than we saw in this older map. In this older map, we have a lot of build-out. And here in 1572, which comes later, which we'll look at later as well in the map of Tartaria that I want to present, it seems like the later the map, the less Tartaria. And the later the map of America, the less of this civilization. The ones that, use Laga, and the Hochi Laga. And one of my comments was saying that Hochelaga was actually Montreal. And we've seen that on a lot of older maps. But again, this is the tongue of one people that existed before Christopher Columbus and before the Great Lakes. And I think the Great Lakes had something to do with the eradication of this people and all of the craters that we see on the southeastern portion of the United States. We see those craters where we had cities down here. Where we had cities, and if the buildings were anything like the depictions that we're seeing here, I mean, they were like castles with spires and probably this beautiful Tartarian style architecture that we are seeing all over the world. And the United States was much older. And I believe that the roots for this people come from the north, and hence why we see the disappearance of the north. This is the center point. And as we see even in this pretty recent depiction, I mean 1595, I'm going to say that that's still fairly recent, and yet we see depictions of towns. But already much has been erased here. And again in Asia, in 1595, again, Tartarian regions. And we'll see later maps, and these disappear. And oftentimes things become covered with ice, and then they just seem to disappear completely off the maps, and certainly off of Google Maps. So we do see a lot in this map of Abraham Ortelius. We see our Shilaga. Just the remnants, just this map has already been stripped. And we do see Christopher Columbus's name here, or Cristoforo, 1492. So in one sense it tells us the map is from 1572 officially, but yet we do see 1492 here. And we still see our noble cities, but we do not see a Salt Lake. But we see in what is now Alaska, civilization, Tucano, and we do see a connection to what is still called Tartaria in this map, to Nova Zembla. And this appears to be the easiest way to actually access these northern regions, through Nova Zembla. And as we look in more recent maps, and definitely on Google Earth, Nova Zembla has disappeared. And it happens slowly. It gets broken up into a few pieces in older maps, and then the newer maps show nothing at all. It's completely gone. And in the map of Mercator, this island, I believe, is the island inhabited by pygmies. If we see here, pygmy habitant. And here we see our Nova Zembla now broken into two, and already depicting a non-connection. So it's actually broken into three pieces and pretty soon disappears completely. And now I just wanted to have a little look at this, what appears to be a new Tartarian entry in the Wikipedia. And this entry, it looks like, has been added February of 2019. And it does not cite any sources, but yet here it is on Wikipedia, and I thought it'd be interesting to have a little look. Tartary, or Great Tartary, was a historical region, but up until the late 18th century it was known as a vast country, located in northern and central Asia, stretching eastward from the Caspian Sea and from the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. Inhabited mostly by Turkic peoples. By the mid-18th century, second to the Spanish Empire, Tartary covered the most land area in the world, with 4 million plus square miles. Tartary was often divided into sections with prefixes denoting the name of the ruling power or the geographical location. As the Russian Empire expanded eastward and more of Tartary became known to Europeans, the term fell into disuse. There was an ethnic and cultural exchange between Slavic and Turkic tribes in Russian Tartary and Muscovite Rus, European areas north of the Black Sea inhabited by Tataric peoples were known as Little Tartary. So very interesting. They give us this map, and this map seems to go right along with this story that they just told. A new map of Chinese and independent Tartary. A new map. And what we see is that most of the towns seem to be labeled in this. And here we see a town, Yakutsk, but then we see smaller towns all over the place, with just a dot, as if you would have a town. And just to get a reference point, let's go over to this side and we can see Moscow, and you see the depiction for a town. And here we also have the Russian Empire depicted across the whole top. But this area is completely full. So this is going to be pre-China, even though they do have China. And we also see China down here in this section. And we also see India being called Hindustan. And again, full of towns. And this one would be a bigger one. Whenever you have this larger depiction, just like we do on modern maps, we show a difference, either a bigger dot or an actual depiction of a town. And what we see is a massive amount of towns in the Himalayas. And this is really interesting, where the Himalayas are now, very unhospitable and, desolate. And here, no. Here we have Himalayas full of rivers and towns along the rivers. And these people are gone. We don't have this build out, and always along the rivers. And we have to remember that the Silk Road ran through here. This was a massive area of trade, probably before the wipeout. And we have a lot of these similar names, these Chaws and these Cheese and these, again, from the Americas all the way over here to Old Tartary. We have, Chahan and, these names are just very similar, the pronunciations of them. And we can even see over here, we have this island off the coast of Russia, this massive island. And down here we have Chicha. And down here we have Japan. And it looks like they're calling it the Isle of Nippon. But we also have Japan. We know that this is clearly Japan here. But how very interesting that this is called Chicha. And in my video about giants, we had the giant that I showed that many people think is fake. And the legend behind that giant was that he was from an island called Chachi. So here we have Chicha, instead of Chachi. So it seems very much that this was the island. And, it's also called Yeso. And we've seen in Sylvie's New Earth videos, Yeso would be like Jesus. And really interesting, And again, I think that this map is post-wipeout. Hence why they're calling it the new map of Chinese and independent Tartary. So this is like the beginning of pushing China now into this area. It seems that this would be the last official map with Tartary on it in 1806 by John Carey. Well, he was the engraver. And while we're looking at this amazing desert, a lot of mummies have been pulled out of this region. A lot of controversial Caucasian mummies. And it brought me to the idea that mummies, may not have actually just been mummified, especially when we find them in fetal positions and, this could have happened in an instant. And what brought me to that idea was my recent video on Dresden, and we can see what looks like people being mummified instantly, where the narrative told us that they were incinerated by fire, but yet many of these people still had their clothing on and a full head of hair, but yet they were completely mummified. What would have been in an instant. And so it makes me also question all the mummies that we find all over the world. Now there are some mummified, like in Egypt, where it seems like it was probably done ritualistically. They were carefully wrapped up and mummified, but we also see more cases of mummification that now appears to have happened in a flash. So that's it for today. There's so much more to explore, of course, but we'll continue this one. I hope you enjoyed, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.